So, here's one of the biggest questions of our time. Has science buried God? For a lot of people, the case is already closed. But what if the popular verdict, the story we all think we know, completely misses what's really going on? Let's dig in.
You know the popular narrative, right? It goes something like this. With every new scientific discovery, we hammer one more nail into God's coffin. The idea is that atheism is basically the only intellectually respectable option left on the table. And look, you have really prominent scientists like Peter Atkins who champion this view. He flat out says that science should be acknowledged as king and that religion has pretty much failed. It's a really powerful, you could say triumphalist statement. But hold on. What if that whole narrative, this idea of a final victory for one side, isn't telling the whole story? What if the real conflict isn't what we've been told it is all along?
To really get this, we first have to see where the battle lines are actually drawn. And it turns out the conflict isn't really a clean fight between science and religion. It's actually a clash between scientists who hold completely opposite views of the world.
On one side, you've got thinkers like Richard Dawkins, who literally compares religious faith to a virus, an evil that humanity needs to get rid of. I mean, that is about as stark and uncompromising as it gets.
But then on the complete other side, you have equally brilliant scientists like Sir Gillian Prance, who says his life's work in science actually confirms his faith in a creator. So the really crucial point here is, this is not a simple case of all the scientists on one side and all the religious folks on the other. It's way more complicated than that.
Okay, now check this out because this is fascinating. Back in 1916, a survey found that almost 42% of American scientists believed in a personal God. Now fast forward 80 years, an entire century of incredible, explosive scientific progress. You'd expect that number to have just tanked, right? But it barely moved. That is a really surprising fact, and it kind of messes with that simple idea that science is just steadily killing off belief.
And you find this same kind of complexity when you look at the most famous battles between science and faith from history. It turns out, the stories that we all learned in school might be more legend than actual fact. Let's take Galileo. The myth is super simple. Brave scientist up against the ignorant, backward church. But the real story? Oh, it's way messier. Galileo himself was a devout believer. His early work was actually celebrated by religious intellectuals. And his fiercest opponents, at least at first, were other academics, secular philosophers, who were furious that he was daring to challenge their hero, Aristotle.
So you see, this wasn't really science versus faith. It was brand new, evidence-based science, championed by a believer, by the way, against an old, entrenched philosophical system that the entire establishment, both secular and religious, was defending.
And it's the exact same deal with that legendary 1860 debate over Darwin's theory. The story goes that T.H. Huxley just mopped the floor with this ignorant Bishop Wilberforce. But if you actually look at the historical records, Wilberforce wasn't some dummy. He was scientifically literate, and he made his arguments on scientific grounds. In fact, people who were actually there said the debate was a pretty even match.
Okay, so if these classic historical examples don't really fit that simple science versus religion story, then what is the real conflict? Well, this is the point where we need to completely reframe the whole debate. Here's the most important point to get. The conflict is not between the method of doing science, observation, hypothesis, experiment, and a belief in God. The real friction is somewhere much, much deeper. It's a battle between two competing philosophies. The first one is called naturalism. This is the belief that the physical stuff, the universe, nature, that's all there is, period. You can think of it like a completely sealed box. Nothing supernatural can get in and nothing can get out. And the second philosophy is theism, and this is the belief that the universe isn't a sealed box at all. It's creation, something that was brought into existence and is held together by an intelligent creator. And this slide says it all. This is the real battle. It is a philosophical debate between naturalism and theism. You see, science gives us all the data, all the evidence, but both of these worldviews offer a totally different interpretation of what that evidence actually means. Now, what's absolutely fascinating is that, historically speaking, one of these worldviews basically provided the fertile soil where modern science could even grow. Far from being an enemy, theism actually gave science a reason to exist in the first place. C.S. Lewis just nails it with this quote. The early pioneers of science weren't shocked to discover that the universe was orderly and understandable. They totally expected it to be because they believed it was the work of a rational, law-giving creator.
I mean, just look at these names. We're not talking about some small-time figures here. We are talking about the absolute giants. Galileo, Kepler, Isaac Newton, Maxwell, the people who literally built modern science. And for every one of them, their faith wasn't a brake on their scientific curiosity. It was the engine pushing them forward.
So all of this brings us to a really critical question for us today. Is the modern assumption of naturalism a conclusion that comes from science, or is it a pre-existing philosophy that's brought to the science before anyone even starts?
This quote right here from Harvard geneticist Richard Lewontin is just, wow, it's stunning. He's openly admitting that his commitment to materialism isn't something he concluded from evidence. He calls it an a priori adherence, which is just a fancy way of saying it's a belief he holds before he even looks at the facts. And he says this commitment has to be absolute because, and this is his words, we cannot allow a divine foot in the door. That's not a scientific statement. That's a philosophical rule.
And this presents a pretty profound challenge. If naturalism isn't a result of scientific inquiry, but just a starting assumption, then is it just a neutral lens we're using to look at the evidence? Or could it be a set of blinders that actually prevents us from even considering any explanation that doesn't fit into that pre-approved materialist box? And that leaves us with one last, really provocative thought. Maybe, just maybe, we've been asking the wrong question this whole time. Maybe the question isn't whether science has buried God. Maybe the real question is this: which worldview? The one that says the universe is a cosmic accident, or the one that says it's the product of an intelligent mind, provides a better foundation for the very fact that science is even possible in the first place.